I'm Eric Bricker, and I've been a psychotherapist for over 25 years. One thing I can tell you for certain is that no one makes it through life unscathed. At some point, many of us will rely on the trusted counsel of another person to help us navigate difficult times, or to reconcile a troubled past. Whether conventional or unconventional, professional or informal, there are a lot of different forms that helping relationships can take. This podcast is an exploration into what makes these relationships work. Who are the people that help us? How do they help us? What do people need help with? My hope is to uncover as much as I can about this very human phenomenon, and I hope that you'll join me. This is the Good Counsel Podcast. Hello, I'm Eric Bricker, and this is the Good Counsel Podcast. Today, I am joined by Dr. Jon Sperry. I had to write down some of his bio on here because his accomplishments are too numerous for me to memorize. Jon is a psychotherapist, university professor, and counselor educator. He has lectured all over the world, including United States, everywhere in the United States, Japan, Ireland, Wales, Mexico, Brazil, Egypt, Russia, China, South Korea, and Singapore. There were a bunch on there that I didn't mention because they were written in like Cyrillic or foreign languages that I didn't know what they were. So these are some of the countries where he has lectured. Jon is a prolific researcher and writer. He has written numerous articles that are featured in empirical scientific journals around psychotherapy. His work is featured in university textbooks. He's been busy. So anyway, I give you Jon Sperry, Dr. Jon Sperry. Thank you so much for joining me here today. It's a great privilege, and I'm so excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. This is awesome to see the work that you've been doing, and I've been following you for a while, so it's really nice to be here.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. So we were talking yesterday and kind of get a little bit of preparation for what we were going to talk about today.
Yeah.
And I found myself in doing my homework about you. It's a little bit challenging because the amount of material that you've produced and the number of things that we could talk about, it's pretty wide and vast. I was looking at an article that you did even for Counselor Magazine. And it was about conceptualizing cases. So it's kind of like the first therapist interview and what the psychotherapist is looking for and how they sort of assess and evaluate and figure out the direction that this therapy is going to go. And I was looking at that and thinking to myself, even that could be an hour-long interview or longer. And that's a small crumb of the many different things that you've taken a dive into. So for starts, I want to talk about Alfred Adler and your relationship to Adlerian psychology, because I would say that probably you are I would say that you are an expert in Adlerian psychology, and that's a strong subject matter. You have been the president of the North American Adlerian Society, and you have a lot of the lecturing and things that you've done is really about Adlerian psychology and the theoretical and practice, and that it seems like a lot of the involvement that you've had lecturing and educating is around that, and your involvement with other Adlerian societies all over the world. So let's talk a little bit about Alfred Adler, your relationship to him and his body of work.
Yeah, Adler is really interesting because his influence in psychotherapy is so significant, but at the same time, many people aren't familiar with that. I think a lot of people have heard of concepts about Adler's work, like birth order and the inferiority complex, but I think there's a lot that Adler sort of had written about or maybe done that was way far ahead of his time, 100 years ahead of his time, that is still being practiced today that many people don't know sort of the origins that Adler maybe had done it first. It's like a common soapbox of many people in the Adlerian psychology world where they hear like Brene Brown talking about some of her concepts and they're like, wait, Adler said that like 100 years ago, even though Brene Brown is fantastic. But so Adler's work for me is just really an interesting body of work where it's looking at people holistically. It looks at people from a social embedded perspective. And it's just really creative. And I think there's just a lot of potential in helping people use Adlerian psychology to apply that to themselves or to help make the world a better place. So I think it's just a theory that I'm super passionate about. And then I'm co-editing the Journal of Individual Psychology, which is the theory's like flagship journal. And we have readers from 100 different countries, and we have authors in that journal from, every single issue is maybe 10 different authors from 10 different countries. So it's pretty exciting to be connected to that community of scholarship and research and practice and clinical practice.
That was one of the things I noticed when I was kind of scouring through some of your work, that a lot of these places where you're lecturing, it's the Adlerian society in these different countries. And it was really like, who would have guessed that there was an Arabian Adlerian society that was housed in that, headquartered in Cairo, Egypt, and that this is one of the places that you're going to lecture. So the work is pretty universal, I would have to say, to have been taken on in all of these different places where a lot of us wouldn't necessarily even have suspected that there was a mental health or there was therapy happening.
Sure. In some of these countries,
Yeah,
there was a book that was published by an author in Tokyo. I think it was somewhere in Japan. And it was called The Courage to be Disliked. And it was basically like a book about like a mentor talking to a student. And he was basically just applying Adlerian psychology and just kind of like enlightening the student about it. And the whole book is about their conversations about life, sort of very philosophical, but it was based on Adler's work, and it's sold over 2 million copies. So one of the things I've noticed is like Adler's work has spread around the world through people doing research and just getting trained in it and taking the ideas to their country. But then that book has probably outsold all of Alfred Adler's writings. So some people have even asked me like, hey, we've heard about this book and we want someone to teach us more about Adler because of this book. I even get some clients coming to see me in therapy because they want an Adlerian therapist because of reading that book. So it's like a popular self-help book, but it's translated in English and many other languages, but originally written in Japanese.
When I think about the title of the book, The Courage to be Disliked, immediately my mind goes to Rudolf Dreikurs,
Sure,
who was one of the foremost proteges of Alfred Adler, and I think was the founder of the original Adlerian Institute in Chicago.
That's right.
And he wrote a book, and a number of essays from the book were very popular, called The Courage to be Imperfect. It's a work that actually inspired me, that I've read, and I really like a lot of the stuff in it. And it's some material that I use with my own clients. So I'm kind of wondering the title of the book. Do you think there's any relationship there? Because that's called The Courage to be Disliked. Rudolf Dreikurs was The Courage to be Imperfect.
Yeah, Adler's work for sure tapped into the idea of the social embedded side of people, but then also like the idea of to survive in a social world that we live in, it requires courage to have to navigate and to solve problems like in work or in our relationships, in our communities. So I think like the idea of helping people in therapy is connected to like helping them maybe connect to their communities, helping them to solve some of the problems that might require a lot of heavy lifting and that require a lot of courage, maybe to deal with some of my fears or my concerns or the things I've been avoiding. So I think that the concepts of like courage and community connection and so like someone feeling capable are big themes in Adlerian psychology for sure. So I think that both of those book titles lean very much just pulling onto different components of the theory.
The idea of the courage to be disliked What is the courage to be disliked? What does that mean?
Sure. Yeah. I have read the book, and in my understanding of like how they try to tackle that as an issue that seems to be a theme in the book, or that can reflect the theory, is I think the idea is that if you believe that belonging is I just have to fit in and then just agree with everyone and totally sacrifice my own feelings or needs, then that may not be true belonging. Or it's that, like, I think that's like, and Brene Brown actually talks about that quite a bit, about fitting in isn't belonging. So I think to some degree, to be disliked is sometimes a way of like people usually often want to avoid being disliked. So they might just people please or avoid their own feelings or needs. So I think the book is really tackling the idea of that sometimes in situations we have to say, like, I really disagree with you. Or I'm just thinking, let's say you're at a family event and someone says something really racist and you're like, oh, that was like, I'm not comfortable with that being said in front of my children. And then maybe confronting that family member or friend who made that racist comment might be like, in the moment, people might be like, why did you have to do that? You made the whole thing awkward by like confronting that person. But I think that's an example. The courage to be disliked might be to do things, even though it might not feel popular in the moment, but it might be like the right thing to do. So that could be like an example of it.
So the whole concept of personal responsibility in social relationships.
Yeah.
There's a lot being talked about today, the term people pleasing. It's been around for a while, but it seems to be getting a lot of special attention in on social media and in other places. And I think what we're tapping into is that sense of false compliance to fit in is not necessarily the same thing as belonging.
Right.
And I think with people pleasing, the kind of the distortion about it is if I agree with everybody and I'm an agreeable individual, people will like me. And I don't think it makes you likable. I think it makes you untrustworthy, because if you are a yes man on every subject, are you really gonna go to me for an opinion if you know the answer is, I don't know, whatever you think, I'm just going to agree with you. So you might like me, or I might be easy to have around, but are you going to confide in me? Are you going to trust me? Are you going to see me as someone to confide in, someone to advise you? Probably not.
Yeah. I think for me, that's where maybe the courage part comes in. It's like to say something that might be not seen as a positive thing, to speak up when maybe other people are feeling like, hey, just don't say anything, it might be better. Or to be disliked because you said an unpopular opinion in a political conversation. Yeah, I think. And I think people pleasing can still be connected or understood as like a trauma response, like the fawning response of, if I, as a protective measure as a child, if I avoid my own needs or my own feelings, that could prevent me from getting hit or harmed by a parent, or avoided or neglected by a parent, if I'm just overly compliant or overly easygoing and I'm not the problem child. Because I think that's just one way of finding your place in the world, is like, well, just don't piss people off and then I'll be okay. But then that comes at a cost.
Yeah. The cost of authenticity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. And I'm thinking about that, right? This whole idea. And here you are, and you're going all over the world and you're lecturing, and you're in cultures that are very different from our own, even though you would assume there's some level of like-mindedness because there are other Adlerian therapists or psychologists, but still the cultural variations in all these places where you're lecturing, it goes pretty wide. And there you are, you're talking about these different constructs and concepts of therapy. I have to imagine there's an element of risk about that. If I was speaking in front of a foreign audience, I would feel some sense of risk of wondering that in some way, despite my efforts to want to do good, that I might accidentally offend somebody.
Yeah, that is the risk of doing that. So that does require courage, going back to that. To know that I might make a cultural misstep is something that I try to prepare for. Often when I have a host or a contact in the area that is maybe spoken with me a lot before the training, I might say, like, I might ask, are there any things that you know about the theory that you think I should be really mindful of as I navigate maybe like birth order, or as I talk about like social expectations of men and women that might be landmines that I need to be mindful of. Or even how I might expect if there are two parents like in an intact sort of marriage, like what is the cultural attitude about homosexuality, or what would be, for example, if I say something that could be highly offensive to a culture, but in my culture or in my worldview, I consider that to be completely acceptable. Two men or two women being married. So I think that is something I do try to be mindful of, that I'm not like constantly making cultural missteps or offending people. But I will say, like, the therapy translating in other countries, it does work quite well when we think of that. Probably all people feel inferior, and culturally the way they navigate around like avoiding feeling inferior might look a little bit different, but the theory, as it turns out, can be quite universal, but still it does require modifications. Especially one thing I've noticed is when you're talking about like Adlerian couples counseling or Adlerian family counseling, I noticed that's where some of the most modification, or maybe like as a therapist trained in the US, when you're then talking to therapists in fill in the blank country about doing family therapy, the fabric of how families are viewed and how men and women are viewed might be very different. So then the way you might try to reorient the family or intervene might be a little bit modified. So I've been learning those pieces, sometimes by accident and many times by other mentors and colleagues who've gone to other countries and learned the hard way by doing the demonstration, and totally it kind of tanked. And then they're like, what? I don't really, like they sort of learn from it after the fact. And so that happens.
When you say that, all I can think about is like comedians. And they're I tried my act, and I tried my act in Singapore, and it didn't go over. I bombed.
You're right. I love that. That is really funny.
Right? I bombed in Singapore. Like, this one killed in Manhattan. I don't understand what happened. Yeah,
that's true.
I think when you're talking about families, it is a very nuanced thing to whatever culture you're in,
For sure.
and it almost has to be adapted in some kind of way. And so there probably is no worldly universal construct that's going to be accepted as is without some modification, right?
Yeah.
So it's probably good that happens. And if you're going to that country, hopefully you have some idea. Florida Atlantic University, the Master's in Counseling program, the counselor education program, that's where I got my degree.
Yeah.
I know that your dad, who is also a university professor and researcher, Adlerian.
That's right.
I think he taught and researched there. And there were other Adlerian therapists, psychologists that taught there as well.
Yeah.
And I remember one specifically. It was a guy by the name of Bill Nichols. Do you know him?
Yeah. He's active in the Adlerian training world and internationally, for sure.
Oh, okay, great. Because this is a long time. This is like 94. I was in school there.
Yeah.
He had a way of framing, because he had this heavy Boston accent, and he had a way of framing things that I can remember certain things that he said. And as a student, you hear these things, and it doesn't really translate in the way that it was meant. And then years later, as you're working, the words echo in your mind. This one thing he said to me specifically, he didn't say it to me, he said it to the class specifically. He said, you show me a sensitive child, and I will show you a tyrant who is holding his entire family hostage, And,
I can hear him saying that.
And those words ring. And when I was working in substance abuse, specifically residential treatment, those words just echoed in my mind over and over and over again.
Sure.
You show me a sensitive child, and I will show you a tyrant who is holding his entire family hostage, And he was great, and he had so many of those. I took every class I could with him because he was pretty riveting in his ability to take the theory and turn it into this sort of very pragmatic,
he is good at
matter of fact, this is how we live, and this is where the theory impacts regular people. And I always, when I think back about Adlerian psychotherapy and Adlerian psychology and what we were learning about in school, I often reflect back on him,
Yeah.
and how probably fortunate I was to be instructed by somebody like that.
Sure. I think in graduate school, usually people are pretty lucky when they get the chance to have someone with like a high amount of expertise, like the way he can navigate a family therapy session or like working with a child and quickly intervening. I think I took 2 classes with him as well in my graduate studies at FAU. Some people call it Florida Adlerian University because of people like my dad or Bill Nickel, Paul Peluso, and even other people who've published like in the Adlerian Journal. So just very Adlerian connected university. There are other folks, but yeah, that's it's great when you can get a professor who has that level of expertise, because he trained with many of the leading Adlerians during his time as like a doctoral student. So and he's just very connected to quite a few of Adlerians who trained him as well.
So for you, that was the beginning of that. The foray into the Adlerian psychology, having this kind of rich bed of influence from which to draw upon and to further your own education.
Yeah. So for me, getting the training at FAU, for sure, there was a lot of Adlerians there. I took a doctoral seminar with Paul Peluso and several courses with Bill Nickel. And so just being around there. But I think the main thing that triggered it for me, the most interest, was going to like an Adlerian conference in the US and seeing some demonstrations happen at the conference. That was very like compelling to me to like even change my major. It was like at the bachelor's level, I was like studying communications, thinking about doing more like TV or radio things. But then seeing that, I was like, okay, I definitely want to do something with therapy. So I changed it to social work, started there, and then finished a social work degree and then did counseling degrees.
That's interesting. I would have never guessed that about you, because your father was so prolific and established and just well known in that area. I would have assumed that this was probably the career path all along. I did the same thing. Yeah. I was a business major for the first 3 years of college. Yeah. I did that because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't really have much of a career identity or a mind of thinking about what I would do. And it was only really in the beginning of my senior year when I started to think about, the fact that I wasn't really equipped to be an adult. And I had no idea what I was doing with school. I was really had to kind of come to grips with the fact that I was utilizing school to delay my adolescence, to prolong my adolescence, because I just had no idea what I was going to do as an adult. And that was where I really had to do some soul searching and think to myself, what does you really want to be doing? And I went back to this experience I had when I was a young teenager, and I saw the movie Ordinary People. And that was you familiar with the movie?
I don't think I've seen it.
It's extraordinary. Yeah. It is way ahead of its time in terms of, because this is back in the 80s, and it's way ahead of its time in terms of what sort of subject matter they were covering, because it was pretty dark in terms of family dysfunction. And it was Mary Tyler Moore, America's sweetheart, played this pretty horrible, cold, narcissistic mom, and Donald Sutherland was the dad. So it was pretty powerhouse actors. And Timothy Hutton is the son. And he experiences this really traumatic event. Like, he and his older brother are out boating, and the older brother drowns and dies. And there's some level of responsibility that's covertly cast upon the son, who's not the favorite son. The favorite son was the one who drowned. So there was all of that. And the kid, Timothy Hutton's character, becomes suicidal, ends up psychiatrically hospitalized, the whole thing. And in the process of his own healing, he meets Judd Hirsch. You remember Judd Hirsch from Taxi?
Yeah, I think so.
So he has an older actor, but anyway, he was the kid's therapist, and he was very confrontational, not at all the way any kind of therapist was ever portrayed in any sort of TV show prior to that time. Really kind of getting in the kid's face, evoking some emotion, getting him in touch with his anger. And I remember seeing that movie and thinking, I had no idea that was somebody's job, that people did that for a living, and that people were involved in like interacting with other people that way, and that in some way that was healing. And that was so fascinating to me, and it made this imprint in my mind. I'm probably like 13 years old when I see this movie, but it just never left me. And I'm in my senior year of college, and I come back to that, and I would think to myself, like, why aren't I doing that? Why aren't I trying to do the thing? And I think it was really the fear of graduate education, and that feeling of like, do I belong there? And somehow I made it happen, and I'm so grateful that I did. It's like changed my life.
Sure.
So I guess you and I, in some way, have that in common, that we were kind of late coming to the party.
Yeah. I didn't start straight into it with a plan. My dad didn't push, or my parents didn't push to be like, you should really do therapy or psychology or counseling or whatever it may be. And I think they were smart to do that. I think if they would have pushed it and expected that I do what they want, that I don't think they would see that. Like, I could see my parents not realizing that's a good strategy.
My dad was a very unintentionally funny person, and he had a Don Rickles like type of affect to him. It was just like a sensibility of that. And he was unintentionally funny, and sometimes the roasting of me and my brother and I, it was like he would be so angry, but it was just so funny, the things that he would say. And because I was so lost and misdirected as an adolescent, and not really very concerned about school and any of these things, but affable, and I guess he saw some ability in me. And his advice to me was this: study business and go into sales, because I think you'll be really good at tolerating rejection. That's what my dad said. You'll tolerate rejection. You'll be good at tolerating rejection. So you should go into sales. You'll probably do really well. And that's how my dad sent me out in the world. So every therapist has some kind of history of something, right? So eventually, I decided to go into therapy, and it's good because, as Dad said, I tolerate rejection really well, right? The courage to be disliked.
That's right.
So it all comes full circle, Jon.
Yeah. Encouraging words from your father.
Oh, yeah. And you know what's funny about it? He meant it to be.
Yeah.
He really was like, you're going to get rich because you'll be unaffected by being turned down, But it's just funny the way he said it. So I like quoting him about that, because he said a lot of funny stuff that way. Yeah. So I was looking through the list of the many things that you have presented on. And again, you've presented and lectured all over the world. And I stumbled upon this one. And it was building community with rhythm and music. And it looks like you've actually done that in a few different places. I know that you and I have shared our mutual interest in music. I'm kind of like a bedroom bass player. I jam with people here and there. And you are a drummer. You play in a pretty well-established cover band locally. Yeah. And you do a lot of work with drumming and drum circles, facilitating drum circles. I'm very curious to know the intersection of Adlerian psychology and rhythm, and what this whole building of community through rhythm, and where that, how that all works, and what you would have to say about that.
Yeah, there's a lot. I'll try to say maybe just a few things that stick out. So Adler and Dreikurs were they both played piano and were quite skilled. I remember my dad mentioning he would go to some holiday parties when Dreikurs would be playing like the piano, and people would be standing around watching him playing during this holiday party. And then he would say, "Hey, whose personality is this?" And he would play it on the piano, and people would say, "Oh, that's Joe." And people could literally guess whose personality he was playing just on the piano. And Paul Peluso at FAU eventually said, "Well, Len, who played what song did he play for you?" He was kind of joking, what would that sound like? But so with that, Dreikurs actually was one of the founding members of the American Music Therapy, the Association of Music Therapy. And he published in the 50s in their journal as it was just becoming launched. So on my my website, drjonsperry.com, I keep a lot of articles that are from when he wrote a handful of these really interesting articles of just using music in therapy, especially with children. And so there's some history there. And his daughter, who's still alive, Eva Dreikers, she lives in the US. She gave me permission to share those because they're so old. They're like not in like the systems for downloading articles. So I just have like the PDFs on my website if people want to check them out. Some really interesting stuff. So what happened was I learned about Adlerian psychology, and then I was doing my master's level internship, and then I'd like seen people doing group drumming circles. And then I was like, what? I should like try to do some stuff there. So I saw like someone at an Adlerian conference doing some drum circle type of intervention. I was like, oh, I could do that. That seems really easy. And for me, that was where the interest came from. It's like seeing that there's an Adlerian overlap with music and our social embeddedness as people, that you can't understand someone unless you understand them through their social world of like their relationships and their family history and how life was that for them growing up, like with their parents. So all of these sort of connections and the puzzle pieces fit really well together. Plus me being a drummer, through high school and college and always playing drum set and having like lots of hand drums around. So like that's really where it came out of, just the interest of taking those two worlds of music and then the other world of counseling and psychology, bringing them together. So I think Adler and Dreikers both having musical backgrounds kind of fits with the creativity of the therapy, which is one of the things about the therapy and the theory that appeals to me, of like the creative aspect and seeing how people creatively solve their problems. And Adler also really liked to address people as like, he really thought about making a new therapy for each client. And he has a lot of quotes about like the client being the artist and the art, where it's like we can look at the art, like we're looking at ourselves, but we can also create our lives and make new stories and change things. So with the creativity and with the music piece, it kind of just fit really well for me. So I think it validated my interest that much more to see the connection. So that's kind of where it came from, is seeing that at an Adlerian conference, being exposed to a lot of music therapists, checking out many people doing drum circles that weren't necessarily therapeutic, but I saw there's a therapeutic element to the social side of like, if I'm running a group in a drug treatment program, which is where I started doing drum circles in 2007. So I've been doing them for a long time, but started in inpatient settings. And then since then, working in college counseling settings for about 16 years, then that's where I was able to apply it with college students and doing lots of like community outreach and working with cancer patients. And then doing a lot of the international training where I work with people who maybe want to incorporate drumming into their work, even as teachers, to wake students up or something, or even with therapists who are doing it to like influence community in a positive way.
Well, it's interesting because as I'm listening to you talk about it, there's a universality to it. Mm-hmm. Because there's all these, whether it's children or people with substance use disorders or cancer patients, and then the cultural nature of it, that it translates into all these other cultures. And and I guess there is something universal in communication about music that I think is very primitive, particularly with drum, right?
Yeah.
Totally. And so, I don't know, you think we're tapping into something very primitive, primordial about people, something that maybe even predates like actual spoken language?
Totally. I mean, if you think of that, the drum is used for so many religious and cultural ceremonies and experiences. So the drum is used for healing. The drum is used for grieving. The drum has been used for, to communicate in war to different troops or to communicate to the opposing side that you're coming. So drumming is so deep, I think, in our, like rhythm and drumming is so deep, like in our histories where it's, it would be to find out like how it's used in different parts of the world. You could see that there's so many benefits to it. And like, this is not really anything that I developed or invented. Many drummers who are therapists have done this. Board certified music therapists do this work, and people have been doing research on it. Like, so it's really significant. I even went to like a talk at the Polyvagal Institute online a few weeks ago about just like the trauma, the ways that drumming is used to address trauma, and how that's, it's really very much a somatic way of helping a person by getting them moving their body and hitting the drum and releasing the emotions. Or there's so much about it that's very trauma informed and really powerful for people.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard from different people about the therapeutic value of drum circles, but never quite an explanation like that one.
It's really cool.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm a little bit lost for words, honestly, and which is unusual.
Yeah.
So one of the things about music, and part of the way I know that it's used in drum circle is that it's a way of establishing connection through people, because there's so much of it in a way that goes beyond actual spoken language, that you can communicate with people musically, and that's sort of this very universally connective thing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us might say that in our very much sort of disconnected world, that music could be the thing that connects and heals people. In some ways, I kind of feel like it is, and maybe should be, or could be, or one of them, right? So you have a drum here that you brought?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, this is a djembe, and it's something I probably had this one for about 20 years. When you translate it in English, what djembe means, and this is like a loose translation because I've seen it multiple ways, but it really means coming together as one, or coming together in community. So if a single drum is defined by looking at how this brings us to community and how it can bring communities together, there's something there. And this is something I would see as, this might be in some cases more effective than medication could be, or maybe in some cases more effective than just traditional talk therapy.
Yeah. It has a certain look. I see it, and it reflects to me a degree of character because it looks well worn and well used, So I brought a bass with me here, my bass guitar, this guy here. That's, I don't know, is that on camera, Stella?
Not yet.
All right.
Here we go. Yeah.
I brought my bass here, and I was thinking in a way that we could demonstrate forming a connection musically and like what would unfold with that. Because you and I have never played together. We both play, we do different things, but we never try to do this together.
Yeah.
And I think with an explanation about music connecting with people and the work with drum circles, in a way we could take a chance at trying to demonstrate that. What do you think? Is that something we could do?
I think that'll be fun. If it sounds good, it sounds good. And if it doesn't sound good, we'll eventually get it sounding better.
Yeah, well, you know what? The thing of it is, I know I'll like it. I know that we'll have fun. I can't speak for anyone who's listening to this, but I know it'll be cool for us, All right, here, I'm in the studio with Dr. Jon Sperry, and you've got a little thing you want to do for the audience. Is that right? You have a special song or whatnot?
Yeah, this is a little
special song or what have you to share with the audience.
A little ditty. This one.
I'm sorry.
That was good. I like that. Since we're gonna jam, I'll just play like a bass, like a repetitive rhythm, and just jump in and
I'll sort of come in.
Yeah,
you start, and I'll sort of come in. I don't know, whenever on the second bit. On the second. I'll come in. I'll come around on the second bit and join in there with you. All right.
Yeah. A client showed me this rhythm, by the way, and I think it was probably 15, maybe 16 years ago, and I never forgot it because it was just a really cool one. So see if you can jam on it.
All right.
Should we try one more?
Yeah.
So maybe I'll jam out just a slightly different rhythm, and we'll just see where it goes.
Yeah, give me is it unfair for me to ask for like some kind of a funk rhythm on that guy?
I could try.
All right.
I can see if I can be a little funky. Let's see if I can manufacture that.
Let's get a sort of a groove going. You know what I mean? Get the people up on their feet and that sort of a thing. You know. Dr. Jon Sperry on the drums.
That was fun.
Yeah, that was cool.
We'll see if we irritated any neighbors nearby who might be doing therapy or whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
We'll find out, I guess.
Well, I could see
I'm
through
sure
the glass.
this gave them therapy. So I think this was good.
Yeah, that's fun. Like, what? Like, how come? Right, someone next. Like, how come we can't do what they're doing? You know, like, how come we never break out the instruments when we're talking? You know. Yeah, that was pretty cool. So, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, and I highly recommend that they do, what is your website?
Yeah, my website's drjonsperry.com.
Okay, and that's your practice website. Mm-hmm. You're actively practicing psychotherapy right here in Boca Raton. You've got virtual available. You've got in-person available. And I would highly recommend to anybody to go and check out your website because there is so much material there. There's links to some of the journals that you've written. There's links to some of the book chapters. There's information about some of the lectures and I think links to some of that stuff. Mm-hmm, so it's a lot of really great material for anybody who's wanted to explore more of what we scratched the surface on today.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming in and joining me. This has really been great fun and awesome. And I found you as interesting as I knew you would be. And you were great. So I really appreciate you coming in and joining me for this.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun doing a jam in the morning like this. And
yeah, why not?
Being able to talk about therapy and traveling around the world.
Bad English accents. We did it all, man.
Yeah, we did it all.
We did it all.
The second bit was even better.
The second bit, all right. We got the timing down. You know, sometimes you take a little bit of production time. It's all right. People get impatient, but it's a artistic process you're involved with. And, you know, sometimes it takes a little time, you know. It takes a minute.
We'll see what our friends in the UK have to say about this.
Oh, they're gonna hate it. They hate when we do accents. Meanwhile, every single one of my favorite actors, like you see them in 3 movies, and you're like, oh my god, that guy's British. Axe from Billions is actually a British actor, like with that New York accent. They're great at doing ours, and we're terrible at doing theirs. So I just want to say to everyone in the UK, sorry.
That's awesome.
All right, everybody. This has been Dr. Jon Sperry, the Good Counsel Podcast. I'm Eric Bricker. Please join us. I'm available. We're available at Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and at my website, ericbrickerlmhc.com.